Hey, what's up, entrepreneurs? It's Randy Adlawan, a creative director over here at Unique Design, and we're going to go another episode today on how to start a clothing brand. This week's episode, we're going to talk about neck labels for your brand, how to make them, and why you should use them for your brand. So let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. So another important aspect of branding your clothing is using neck labels. And today's episode, we're going to talk about all the kinds of neck labels, how to use them for your brand. And we're going to have a time code down in the description so you can kind of skip to parts that you may know or may not. So it should be down in the description. And if you see a certain part you want to jump to, go ahead and jump into that. Also, before we get into anything, we're going to ask you guys again, please subscribe to the channel. The more subscriptions we get, the more we can grow this channel. So if you haven't done it already, please subscribe, like the video, and please leave a comment if you have any questions. We can jump in there and get going on that. Why use neck labels? One of the main reasons why I always encourage everyone to use a neck label is that it brings your brand to a place where it actually looks more of a quality brand rather than just something that you made at home. A lot of people print t-shirts, and when you get a t-shirt and you see a different manufacturing label on the inside of the shirt, you don't really take the brand as seriously as you do. Now, neck labels aren't very expensive, but they do add to your cost, and it's something you want to consider taking your brand to that next level is adding neck labels. So there are many kind of different labels that we can use. One of the most common ones is called a woven neck label. And woven neck labels can be in many different styles. They can be woven out of taffeta, woven out of different fabrics. Taffeta is probably the most common one. I'm going to show you an example. So this is a Hanes blank, Hanes Comfort Wash. And as you can see, it has a woven neck label. And it has the information on here. And this one is out of taffeta. It's folded in half, has a Karen stretches and everything there. It's actually woven into the neck tape of the shirt. A lot of quality brands use woven neck labels just because it gives it that extra sense of quality in your brand. So using a neck label that's woven just kind of takes it to a different level rather than just a printed one. Nothing wrong with the other ones, but that's probably the highest quality looking label because you can get them in different colors. You can get them in different widths, different finishes. The only issue with woven neck labels is that they're difficult to do on an existing blank. Now, you can get a woven neck label sewn into your own shirt, what we call private labeling. Private labeling is when you go to a company and you ask them to put your label or your brand instead of using theirs. Most companies that do private labeling have a 500-piece minimum. So you're looking at doing at least 500 minimum if you want your name, your label custom sewn into that existing blank. Now, people do buy blanks that have woven labels. They have them cut out and have us or other printers install a new one. It's a little bit more difficult that way, and you do mess with the integrity of the shirt a little bit because they're not going to be cut out 100%. And when you sew in the new neck label, some people will notice. So you just want to take that in consideration if you want to do a woven neck label. If you want to do a private label, which is the best way to do it, but obviously you got to be able to meet that 500-piece minimum, which most manufacturers require. Or if you want to cut them out and then sew in your own, it's going to cost a little bit more than obviously printing them, but the integrity of the shirt and the quality of the shirt may not look as good depending on the blank that you choose. The other option that we have is printed labels. And printed labels are, I'm going to show you a Nike shirt. This is where they print the label on the inside of a shirt, whether it's a screen printed or a heat transfer. The first reason why people like doing this is because, like myself, I don't like the feeling of a label on the back of my neck when I'm wearing a shirt. Normally I just tear the labels out, right? But if it's a woven label, you can't just tear it out because it, kind of messes up the integrity of the shirt. But having a printed label, it gives you that extra comfort when you're wearing it. So a printed neck label is definitely a way to go, and to me I feel like it's the easiest way for entrepreneurs to start their brand because it's the cheapest way to go, and you can get real creative with a printed neck label. You can put your design so many different ways. You can do so many different things that you could do on a printed label that you wouldn't be able to do on a woven label. Because normally when you do a woven label, you order, hundreds or thousands of these labels, you get them sewn into the blanks. Where if you're doing a printed label, you can actually come up with different designs for limited editions and for collaborations and for certain things. And so it's not a one-all thing. And normally when you do a women's shirts, the woven labels are a little bit thinner over the thicker ones for the men's. So when you're doing men's and women's, when you're doing woven labels, you're looking at doubling your costs as far as ordering labels to put in there. Where with a printed label, you can change, you know, the design, change the screen, and kind of do a one-size-fits-all on all of those. Now you do have another option, and the other option is tearaway labels. A lot of blank manufacturers make what we call tearaway labels, and these labels are just printed on these, you know, cheap material where you can just tear the label out, and it barely leaves any trace of the label being actually in the shirt. So once you tear that label out, it's easy to print the label on the shirt, and it makes it for a better printing process for printers. Kind of saves you on the cost as far as like cutting out a woven neck label. It makes it a little bit easier for you to label your own shirts with your own designs. Now, a great thing that a lot of brands have been doing these past couple of years is on their labels. This is AS Color. I've showed them before. It's one of my favorite blanks. It's a company out of Australia, and they make these amazing blanks. This is the paper tee, and they also have a staple tee. They actually have these two labels, right? So you have the one label, which is their brand, the size, and then you have another label, which is the size and all the care instructions. Now on the next level, tearaway label, they do the same thing. So where they have the one label with their brand on it, and the other label with the care instructions and everything else you would need. Now what's cool about these is if you can't afford to do your own printed labels, what you can do is you can just have this first label removed, where the other label remains. Now there's no branding on this label, so you can still have the FTC regulations for your customer. It'll tell them what the shirt is. There just won't be any branding on it, which in my opinion is the second best thing to, you know, labeling it yourself. Because if you're able to tear off that brand and then leave just the care instructions, it still looks like your own brand. It doesn't have as much creativity as your own brand would have. But if you're, you know, low on funds to, you know, get your brand printed and you just really want to get it out there and you look at saving costs, that's another option they have, and I recommend that a lot to people who don't really have a good design or just don't really have the funds to really do printed labels on their shirts. So when you're doing woven labels or you're doing printed labels, there are requirements. The FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission, requires to have on all textiles that are sold within the U.S. Now, that's why when you buy a shirt, no matter who makes it, there has to be a label in there whether you tear it out or not, but you can't get shirts without labels. And you're not supposed to get any textiles without labels here in the U.S. What are the requirements? Well, the first requirement is you got to have the country of origin of the garment. Not where it's printed, but where the garment is actually made and sewed. So if it's made in Nicaragua, if it's made in Honduras or China, it has to have the country of origin on there is the main thing. The second thing is it has to have what the fabric is made of, whether it's 100% cotton, whether it's 50% cotton, 50% polyester, or a tri-blend. It has to tell you what the fabric is made of on the neck label. The next thing is you got to have your company name, or if your brand name is different than your company name, you have to have what they call an RN number here in the US. And we'll go over that in the legal terms on another episode. And if it's sold in Canada, we have what we call a CA number, which has to be on there. The other thing that you need to have on there is care instructions. So the care instructions have to be simple, basically telling people how to care for the garment, wash it cold, hang dry it, do not iron based on the design. So you got to have these on the garment in order for it to be, you know, to meet the FTC regulations for your label. So you got to keep that in mind whenever you're designing it and whenever you're putting it together, that you got to be able to have all these legally in order to sell textiles in the US. Other countries aren't as strict, and some people get away without doing it. My advice is, if you're running a brand, just do it the right way. Another important thing about designing printed labels, other than woven labels, and that'll be a different episode, but for designing printed labels, you got to take in consideration the width of the design. Most printers, we use either a sleeve platen or a specialty platen that has a limited size of where you can actually print. So you want to design within those confines. If you're doing heat transfers, your requirements are different because you got to have a certain thickness on the line thickness in order to make a transfer. And I'll have another episode on that later down the road. But the most important thing is just making sure that you're utilizing that space that's given to you. Not going too big, and obviously if you go too small, you have, you know, issues of people not being able to read what you have on there. The other thing is you want to have a cool design, but you can't get too detail orientated on it. Because normally it's on the inside of the shirt. So the inside of the shirt, the face of the fabric is different than the outside of the shirt. The outside of the shirt has a different face. So what that means is that the inside is a little bit rougher than the outside of the shirt because it's going to have a different feel. So the printability is going to be the same on the inside of the shirt as it would be on the outside of the shirt. I would always tell people, design it in one color, because trying to do two color prints on your label, first of all, just no one really does it, and it's going to add more to the cost, and it's going to add more to issues in the printing section, because sometimes printing more than one color on the inside, again, because you're using the different side of the fabric, it won't look as good. And also, you don't want that to show through on the outside of the shirt. So if you have like a big thick design, when you print it on the inside of the shirt, it might show through on the back side of the shirt. So you want to take that in consideration. You know, try to do it in one color and try to keep the design not as thick and bold, because you don't want it to show through the other side of the shirt when people are wearing it. These are just things you want to take in consideration for anytime you're doing a printed label, a woven label, and you know, I have a little bit more resources down the road. So again, you guys, thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe if you didn't subscribe. Check out the other videos on this channel, and I just want to thank you guys again for taking the time just to, you know, learn more about how to build a brand. You guys have a great day.